Hello and welcome to the Not Quite Otaku Anime Podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we are going to be doing another episode of Does It Hold Up? And Brandon, what are we going to be doing today?
So we're going to be talking about the Lupin the Third movie, The Count of Cagliostro.
The Count of Cagliostro, yes.
Cagliostro? I've been
Cagliostro.
been fumbling with that word this whole time.
Yeah, that's all right. So it is Lupin the Third, The Count of Cagliostro. Hey everyone, this is Joe here. Minor edit. If you may have noticed, we were calling the movie by the wrong title. Obviously, we know it is the Castle of Cagliostro, but yes, for some reason we just kept calling it the Count of Cagliostro. So sorry for that. And now back to the show. So it's another movie. I guess we all know Lupin. Well, we don't all know. Some people might know Lupin the Third is a series that has been going on since the 70s. And so it's been going on for a while. So this was a movie that came out in 1978, I believe was the year. And then it came out in the U.S., though, on my birthday.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
I found out.
Oh, yeah?
April 3rd.
I didn't catch that when I looked at the date. That was like
came out
91?
Yeah, in the U.S.
Yeah.
So it came out on, so I was like, that's cool. So yeah, on my birthday, it came out in the U.S. With a dubbed version. And then there was actually another dub that was done by Manga Entertainment, which is... I own the DVD. That's the one that I have. I'm assuming the one on Netflix, which is how I watched it, is the same, is probably the more modern dubbing of it. But I don't know. I couldn't confirm that. And I didn't really try hard enough to either.
Right. I was not all that interested in researching this as much as other things we might have been watching. So.
Okay. So Lupin the Third, also, fun fact about it, it was directed by Hayao Miyazaki before he was the Hayao Miyazaki that we all know. So that's just another little fun fact.
Yeah, this was...
I can tell you're enthused by that one. No. So no, let's just get into it. So this is another one of our segments of Does It Hold Up, where we take a look at older anime from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and we try to see if it still holds up.
Yeah, if it's still enjoyable in the modern era.
Yeah, so I just get a feeling that you feel a certain way about this movie. So I'm going to ask you, so I want you to, what's your initial thought? I just want to hear what your first thought about it is.
So my first thought about this is it is very much in line with everything Lupin the Third I've ever seen, and I am just not a fan of Lupin the Third. So the kind of Looney Tunes style violence and the low stakes comedy, the comedy doesn't hit, the action doesn't hit. It's just not my series.
All right, so I'm going to say the complete opposite.
Oh, yeah.
Is that actually all the things that you hated about it are all the things that I really liked about it. So let's just dive into this then. So first off, let's talk about the humor. Because, okay, so for me, I thought this was actually, I thought it was funny. Like, I think it's like, it is funny in the sense of goofy, over the top, maybe a little Looney Tunes, like you said. But there's a lot of the gags. That's something I want to talk, is that there's a lot of gags in this. And I thought that was done really well. And I don't know if maybe it's like an appreciation from a theater background or something like that I have, that like sort of the bits and the little things, but I just thought it was really well done. I think I wrote a couple down just so I
I'd be curious exactly what you were looking at, what hit for you.
So there's so like one of them, for example, is like when they're swimming they go down into the water, and there's the cogs and all the stuff for, I think, at that point. But so he's in the water, and so he's like trying to swim against the current, and it's just this sort of like funny little bit of him swimming and then like kind of getting like dragged down again and things like that. There was a part where he tumbled down the roof. There's just a lot of physical comedy that the stuff with the ring, like he has a fake ring that he swaps it out and they tricks them. There's a lot of tricks the count. So I don't know. There's like a lot of stuff like that is what I actually enjoyed about it.
Yeah, so there is a lot of physical comedy, and I assume that, like, if you enjoyed it, I'm sure other people do. In an animated setting, physical comedy just doesn't really land for me, because you, as animation, it has the freedom to kind of be whatever it wants to be. So there's not the absurdity you get when you have a real person doing physical comedy, if that makes sense. Where to me it just doesn't really hit, because it's kind of like, well, you're in a world where the opening scene, they're driving up the side of a mountain in like a Volkswagen Beetle, and the car is animated in such a way that it almost seems like it's alive, which is, all of that's fine, but like it's just kind of, you're in a ridiculous world, so physical comedy just doesn't seem ridiculous to me, which loses its kind of shock value, if that makes sense.
I can see what you mean, but then it's also, the thing about it is, because it's animated, it can be even more ridiculous, because there are things that happen. I mean, when he falls, they fall off the cliff in the beginning, and he shoots the grappling hook, he latches onto the tree branch that's sticking out of the mountain, and then, of course, as you would expect, it rips out of the mountain, it falls, it hits him on the head and all that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you couldn't really necessarily do in like a live action movie. It probably wouldn't maybe work as well, because you'd be like, okay, this person would be dead. But because it's this world of animation where you have the car is like literally driving on the sides of the mountain and all sorts of crazy stuff, like you can buy in that. Like, actually, that you mentioned it, like one of my favorite parts of it was just the intro. It starts off, like, what I liked about the movie is it just starts off. There's no, building up to this, that, or it's just like, here it is. There's this chase scene. They see this girl's kidnapped or something's going on, and it just begins. And so that was something I enjoyed. And it's just got the music is lively. I think it sets up this atmosphere of fun and goofiness, which is what I would want out of Lupin the Third, being that I had some familiarity with Lupin before this, and then I kind of had an idea of what to expect. But I just think it just sets it, like, it's not one of those movies. I think sometimes you get like an anime movie or something else where, I don't know, it's like gonna kind of try to like teach you about the series or teach you about the thing, if it's a side thing. And I feel like with this, it just dumps you into it. And so that even if you know what the series is like, or you don't know what the series is like, you get the essence of it right away. So
yeah,
I don't know, that's something
I do think that's something the movie did well, in that, like, by the nature of what Lupin the Third is, I think it's a little easier to do this, but they do not ask you to be familiar with what Lupin the Third characters are and what the world is like, but they also don't tell you what it's like. They do know. They make no attempt to kind of connect this to the Lupin the Third world. They don't do character introductions in almost any way. You might get, names here and there, but it's also not really necessary, because it's just not that deep. You can tell, like, oh, Lupin's the master thief character. Jigen's his sidekick character. Fujiko is the recurring female femme fatale. They're all
Goemon's the samurai.
Yeah, they're all characters that, if you've watched any sort of media, you're probably familiar with their character types. You don't really need much beyond. They're very physically clearly what they are.
Yeah, it was actually interesting, because they didn't really like something like Fujiko, because her relationship with Lupin, and then, I mean, she's just like such a big character, and I feel like, I mean, she doesn't come into it until, like, I mean, you kind of can tell there's something that she gets revealed later, but it's one of those things where you're kind of like, oh, okay, just kind of like drop her in. I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think
it's again, they don't give you much of a backstory on anyone, and I guess if you were completely unfamiliar with Lupin the Third, like, Fujiko's character might seem kind of random in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so that, I think the things, like you're saying, the things I didn't like so much about it, you did. But what about just from a construction standpoint? Like, how did you feel about the animation, voice acting for something that, I guess the dub was not made 40 years ago, but the film itself was.
Still old, though.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think the redone dub was late 90s, I think.
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the dub's good. I think it's, like, it sounds good. I think it's, I think it's a lot of the same actors who've done the series, which I think the one that I was familiar with that they aired on Adult Swim was the second season or second series of it, Lupin the Third, the second part of it, part 2. I don't know how many different ways I can say it was the second part.
Because Lupin the Third Part 2, I believe, is the official title.
The concise way to say it, or you can do it the way I just did. And it felt familiar. It sounded the same. Like, it sounded good. I mean, I think the animation, obviously it's a movie, so you can definitely tell that there's more of a budget. So that's the thing. Like, in watching this, I just wanted to go back and look at some of the older episodes. So I watched some from Lupin the Third Part Two, and then I watched the one of the newer ones. Um, which one's the new one? That is, because you watched some of it too, right? Is it Part 5?
So I've watched some of Part 4, which I think was somewhere around like
Part 4.
2015 to 2017, somewhere in that range.
Okay, it was Part 4
Part
that I watched.
5 has started to air. I don't know if it's available to watch in the US or not. I've not watched any of Part 5.
Okay, so it was Part 4 was the newer one that I watched. But
Yeah.
anyway, so Part 2 was like what was around right when this movie was coming out. I think it came out just before, or maybe it was at the same time. And I mean, there's an obvious drop off in the animation. So you can see that definitely the budget went into, they put money into this movie because I think it looks really pretty. I think it's vibrant. I think it's colorful. It's just nice to see a prettier looking Lupin the Third, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree.
What about you?
I would agree with you that this, especially for a movie made in the 70s, this is a very beautiful movie. I think
Yeah.
the animation is very fluid. I think, like I said, the action scenes maybe weren't necessarily up my alley taste-wise, but I think they had a very nice flow to them. They were very fluid. Everything seemed like it moved very fluidly, which is not always what you get when you're talking about something that's over 40 years old. You're used to
Yeah.
seeing a lot of choppy animation, and I think this was very good, very beautiful.
That's the thing. You said the word fluid, and that is exactly what I thought. I actually had written it down when I was taking notes on this, and it's a very fluid movie. And again, like you said, for its time. I mean, granted, like animation, the more money, the more time you can make it look better. But it's still sometimes things of their time might not be as good as we expect them nowadays or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a great word. It's a very fluid movie, the animation, and I mean, just I just think I like the action in it. I think the action was fun. I mean, there's where he fights all the claw guys. There's all that. I mean,
well, so let's talk about that for a second, because the claw guys to me felt very out of place for the setting. You're talking European castle, kind of medieval feel to the location. I don't remember the name of the country they were supposedly in.
It's Cagliostro. It's it's like a made up country that is.
Oh, okay, so
sort
I
of
thought that
set in that Italian.
I thought that
region.
was I thought the nation was something different, and that was the castle name. But maybe I'm just mixing things up. But anyways, those like the clawed foot soldiers were very much more reminiscent of something out of like Ninja Turtles than something that I would see in a medieval setting, and it kind of just took me out of it a little bit. I don't know if you felt that way at all, but
yeah, it didn't necessarily bother me. I mean, you can tell that I don't know, the guy's got money. Figured he's got these Wolverine looking, like it's like a mix between Shredder and Wolverine, or I don't know,
and with a little like ghoulish feel to them. They're all like hunchbacked and
it also looked like then they could have been in a Scooby-Doo episode too.
Yeah, a little. Yep,
Yeah.
very much.
Like you would have like they would have been the guys in like the Scooby-Doo episode that they're like trying to keep the secret under wraps and something, and then you rip their face off, and it's like, oh, it's that guy. Ooh.
It's that guy from Act 1.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I didn't mind it at all. I think like I mean, it's got some darkness to it. I mean, there's parts where like Lupin gets completely messed up and shot, and there's like, I mean, like again, I think like what's cool, the wedding, the gag of how they set up the priest and they have everyone there, and Fujiko's pretending to be the reporter. It's just like, I don't know.
I think that was my favorite that was my favorite scene of the whole movie, was Fujiko as the reporter trying to cover this story, and everyone clearly terribly acting as if they don't know what's going on, especially with Zenigata. Like that did hit for me. I think that was the one time I did laugh quite a bit.
Yeah, that was a fun, like, I don't know, this is a fun reveal. I think, like, again, the movie for me, I think the biggest thing I can say about the movie is that it is a fun movie to watch. I think it felt a little long sometimes. I think like I probably could have been like 10 minutes shorter, in my opinion. It just started to, as it kept going, I was like, okay, this is going a while. But also like the main plot of it, I mean, this guy's money laundering, he's got like the whole world under his thumb, basically, with the fraudulent money. What is the word I'm looking for?
Counterfeit.
Counterfeit.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, I know this is not the word. I mean, hey, we talked about it last time with Ghost in the Shell, but there's like some real world things going on, you know?
Yeah, I guess you could make that stretch, but this one I feel like is just a little more like, oh yeah, this one guy who has this tiny country with, I think in the tens of thousands of people is able to counterfeit the world's currency to such a great degree that like he has everyone under his thumb. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's just like
Well, I mean,
it's a little I don't know. They're going for large scale, and they certainly hit that. But then at the same time, you really have to suspend disbelief.
I mean, they got, when the Interpol says to Zenigata, take a hike, and then all the nations are all kind of
that certainly
you can't really do that.
Yeah, that certainly resonated a little bit. Where it's the government corruption showing. Sure, that's always going to be around.
Yeah, it was just a little fun thing, but and then I guess just like Lupin's relationship with Clarice, who's the princess. I think I mean, I didn't expect it to be a long-term, long-lasting thing anyway. It's Lupin the Third, so I was almost surprised when he seemed to be committed in any sort of way, almost. But she's as a character, I think a little bland. Maybe she's like, but I think you maybe need that in terms of you have all these really larger-than-life characters.
Yeah, she fills a role. The damsel in distress. She's the trope. This movie's not about her. It's about the Lupin the Third characters. She's gonna be in this movie and never be seen again, and that's, she fills a role. But yeah, I would agree that kind of plain.
Also, the Count himself, when we were watching it, noticed he looks like Austin Powers a little bit. Did you get that?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't pick up on that.
I don't know. It was just Alyssa when we were watching it said she's like, he kind of looks like Austin Powers. I was like, yeah, with the mustache he does. He's a good villain. I think it's like, I will say this movie is not anything that is going to challenge the way you think or view the world. It is not going to be anything that is like revolutionary, but I think it's like it is a fun movie to watch. I think the animation is, like you said, fluid. I think the gags, just the action. I mean, there's the part where Lupin disguises himself as Zenigata, and then, he tells the soldiers that Lupin escaped, and then Zenigata comes back, and then there's like this whole like and they're all fighting each other, and then, Lupin sneaks out, and or like when there's a part with the statue and the trap door, stuff like that, where he reverses it on the butler, and then they all fall in instead.
Yeah, and it's, again, I think the biggest problem I have with this is like I'm all right with watching an episode of Lupin the Third, but one is enough for me at any given time, and this offered nothing more than an episode of Lupin the Third, except for the fact that it was 90 to 100 minutes long. So it
gave you like 3 episodes.
Well, exactly, which is more than I want, because I haven't even watched that much Lupin the Third. I've probably only seen about 20 episodes, give or take, and I've seen all the gags in this. Like I've seen it before, so it really just didn't, to me, feel like it offered anything new. And that really became clear at the end, where obviously Lupin the Third doesn't have much of an overarching story to begin with. It's very episodic in nature. But, at the end of this, you weren't even given a little bit of a payoff. It was just like hard reset. Oh, the characters are exactly where when we started this movie.
Yeah, it's just like, all right, well, she's like, I love you and I want to be with you. And he's like, I got to go.
Bye.
And then they just all leave. And then Zenigata's chasing them, and they're just back to like where they were. It doesn't Fujiko. She's on her bike. And then, the guys are in the car, if I remember. And then and then it's just the chase continues, and then on to the next adventure. Which I guess, like, I could say, like, that is probably the one thing with Lupin, is that it is episodic in nature. So this does just feel like kind of like one big episode, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But, yeah, and it's actually interesting was watching the newer episodes of the series, how it actually had a plot. When I was watching part 4, this is just a side note, but that was just like a weird thing. I was like, wait a minute, when did Lupin become a continuous thread?
Yeah, and I think they've played more around with that in the more modern iterations of it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know. I don't.
So
That's about my thoughts on it. Do you have anything else to add?
yeah, I don't. I mean, I think this one's like pretty straightforward. Probably not as in depth as something as Ghost in the Shell, like we previously talked about. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. So I guess if we were to say if it holds up, Brandon, what do you think?
If you want to just watch a mindless romp with decent animation and some funny bits, I'm sure it's fine to watch, but for me personally, I would say this does not hold up. I did not enjoy watching it particularly.
Okay.
And what about you?
I would say if you want a fun movie that has some vibrant animation and goofy action, and even if you don't want that necessarily, I think it does hold up. I think it's an important movie. I mean, just you look at it, Miyazaki directed it, so from if you want to be like a history nerd about it, that's pretty cool. But the thing is, I think I think it does animate comedy in some of the best ways I've seen it without it being the fan service kind of comedy. You know what I mean? That we're kind of used to today in a lot of anime, where like the gag is, oh look, like he saw her bathing, huh, or something like that. It's so I don't know. For me, I think it definitely holds up, and I say I would recommend it.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I never really thought of it that way. That it is a better, or not better, but it is a different form compared to kind of more modern comedy and anime. But
Yeah. So I think that's like one of those things where it makes it actually I think more accessible, and I think that's the biggest thing. Is so like if you were to watch anime and if you wanted to look at some other stuff and you wanted to be like, okay, what's good comedy anime, and don't get me wrong, there are good anime out there that are funny and not for just the gags like of the bathing girl and everything else, like I was saying. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but if you want something that's I think just like more accessible, I think this is a great way to do it, because I think it does have a lot of ties to kind of the Western cartoons that a lot of us are used to having grown up with. So that physical comedy, I think, is such a big thing in Western cartoons. Someone's always getting bonked on the head. Someone's always getting something dropped on them, kind of thing. So I think it's easily accessible, and so that's why I think also it's another reason why it really holds up.
yeah, I think that's very fair. I think this feels more like a Western cartoon in a lot of ways than an anime, but also I think that's why I don't really like it, because it's not really my jam.
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. I'm not big into Western cartoons either. So, all right. Well, I think that pretty much sums it up then. I think we're split on this one. So take with it what you will. You can either go, if you feel like you're more of my personality where you enjoy the things that I mentioned earlier, then go with that. And if you think you're more like Brandon, then I say follow his advice and don't watch it.
Yeah, I think.
Anything else you want to add?
Nope, I think that'll just sum it up.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Not Quite Otaku Anime Podcast, and we will see you next time.
Bye.